things that we're noting on options expiration is the fact that we're going to have a lot of volatility and what I like to call the tractor beam effect to the open interest levels in some of these major ETFs. So let's talk about the QQQ and the March 15 option chain, because what we're trying to do, after all, is try to find a dip to buy, try to find an uptrend, try to find a supported market index sector, right? And get in calls when we can use options expiration volatility in our favor, right? This is just another catalyst to buy the dip. And if you've been watching any of these videos, you know buy the dip is exactly what I've been advocating. This is the year of account growth, right? And this is one of the steps we take to try to do it. All right, so let's take a look at QQQ. And a lot of the liquidity by way of open interest. So there's volume, how many contracts are traded, and then there's open interest, how many total contracts are there. So it's the open interest I'm interested in. 435 to 429.78. I know it's a quirky strike, but that's where we're sandwiched with a lot of OI, 43,000 contracts at both those strikes. So I'm looking at that zone, which is roughly a 5-point zone. Let's just call it 430 to 435. I'm looking for that zone holding. Now, the closer I could get to 430, the happier I would be. But as I'm down to the last hour, and I'm recording this right now at 2:59 p.m. Eastern, so an hour before the bell rings, what I've done is in the mastery, I've sent out an alert to get long the NASDAQ. But we're going to use the futures to do that. And there's a combination of things going on here. Number one, we have a trend, and the trend is in the NASDAQ. Is it a great trend? No, it's a little wobbly, admittedly, but it's certainly one that's dominated by the green candles. It's above the 34 EMA wave. It's been adhering to support at the gray volatility support zones very consistently. And if respecting the trend that was suggests continuation, this is certainly a continuation to the upside, right? Number two is NASDAQ futures are the best way to understand what's happening in any alternative NASDAQ symbol, QQQ, quadruple Qs, NDX, whatever it is. The NASDAQ futures trade nearly 24 hours a day. And this is the best way to understand what's happening in the NASDAQ. And then we can take that idea over to QQQ, use the liquidity on the options chain and say, look, there's a pretty darn good chance that this area between 430 and 435 is going to be supported. As we sink down into that area, let's buy some calls. Now, there's a few other things that I'm going to keep in mind as well, and this takes us to the sector weighting. So forever trading the NASDAQ, and I'm going to deep dive the NAS a little bit in this video, because I realize if you've been watching Charts and Coffee every morning, 9 to 9:20 Eastern, if you're watching the Top Tier Outlook show, that's Sunday at 6 p.m., if you're watching the free videos that we post here at the channel, I've been talking a lot about financials and industrials, and that's not to say I don't like tech. It's just not necessarily my favorite place to look, but we have some interesting setups happening right now. So yes, I'm not letting go the XLF and XLI narrative. Love those narratives. In fact, next week, I'll probably be right back to talking about JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, my beloved American Express. We're going to be right back to talking about the gorgeous uptrends in those corners of what would dominantly be the S&P and the Dow sectors, right? But let me talk about something I've been neglecting in our conversations. So that's what I'm going to do with the Qs. And a simple answer could be, well, why, Rog? What is it that you see? So let's dig inside. Let's dissect the NASDAQ. Dissecting the NASDAQ means looking at a number of sectors. Now, I'm going to do it out of order of weighting. I'm going to do it really in order of interest. A lot of folks are wondering, Rog, where do we get support in SMH? And I think with SMH, what I see here is a little bit less about where do we get support, but when do we get support? I'm okay letting the SMH just sort of simmer down and get through options expiration. The most liquidity is sitting in the March 15 210, and the open interest is just over 11,000. Now, we've known this. This has been the highest open interest for a handful of days. So if I'm trying to set up an SMH buy, and I know there's a tractor beam by way of over 11,000 contracts at the 210 strike, there's a pretty good chance that we could have lower lows. And that was really what I wanted to capitalize on. Now, whether it's a buy on a day like today or whether it's a buy next week. The next options expiration is going to be March 22, right? But not a lot of liquidity there. So we want to use those third Fridays of the month to determine where this tractor beam is sitting. Ultimately, it's going to make sense to wait on SMH, but realize that by buying QQQ, we're taking a ride on that potential rebound in the SMH. XLK is a choppy mess, but interestingly enough, the lows that we've seen on the 29th, on the 5th, on the 11th, and now here on the 15th, notice we're kind of hovering in this area around 203 to 205. Love it, right? That too is going to benefit from the QQQ is going to benefit from any bounce in the XLK. XLC is a very strong sector within the NAS. It did not quite get to the daily price movement range, but it's sitting on this Darvis beautifully. So again, by buying Qs, I'm also able to take advantage of what isn't a setup here, but a sector that will contribute to upside follow through. And then finally, XLY. XLY has not been great. This particular sector is really being dragged down by things like McDonald's and Nike and Starbucks and Tesla. Amazon is a great corner of the NASDAQ, fantastic corner of the NASDAQ. And Amazon tagged the daily price movement range. So if Amazon is one of the Magnificent Seven, and it's one of the better looking magnificent stocks at the current time, by buying the Qs, this is buying the tide in terms of an individual boat at the sector or stock level. So that's how I look at the NASDAQ. That's a holistic look at how I would look at any index. If you can internalize this process, which is very repeatable, you'll be able to find the relative outperformers anywhere you're looking. And you'll be able to take advantage of more of these names contributing to the follow through that you're looking for. Hope that helped. It's a process that I repeat day in and day out. And this is how it works in the NASDAQ futures. I'll see you in the next step. Hey traders, Raghee from Simpler Trading. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to leave a like and a comment below. And remember, subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll get notified of the next update. And when you're ready to join me for live trading, be sure to head on over to simplertrading.com. I'll see you in the next update.